swing by my place after, so I can pay you in full.
Thanks anyway. What'll it be?
I'm about to bust.
A couple of months ago, Magic the Gathering released their Final Fantasy set. Now, in all my time of playing Magic, I've been super excited when, say, Lord of the Rings, or Fallout, or Warhammer released a set, as it was an interest of mine coming into the world of Magic. However, it was a little bit different with Final Fantasy, as I was already on board with anything and everything Magic, but I have never played a Final Fantasy game before. I knew some of the characters, and remember my brother playing it when I was a kid, but I never actually got around it. So I put a poll up on my social channel thing on YouTube asking if I should check out my first ever Final Fantasy game, or finally get around to playing and reviewing The Last of Us. A game that I have played, but I have never finished because I got bored with it and kind of wandered off. And, well, Final Fantasy 1. Now, I asked around a couple of mates of mine about what Final Fantasy game should I check out, and my friends at Bandai Namco ANZ heard that I've never played Final Fantasy before, and they hooked me up with a copy of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. It is an iconic story retold without turn-based combat because I'm not really a fan of turn-based games. Which is kind of ironic because Magic is a turn-based card game. And it's probably safe to say that Final Fantasy VII is one of the most well-regarded entries in this series, because Cloud and Sephiroth are iconic characters, and hell, I've not played the game and I know of these characters, but finally though, after about 7.5 hours of gameplay...
This guy... This is not my kind of guy.
Now before we get into that though, as Magic had me look into Final Fantasy, Magic the Gathering has just released a brand new set of Edge of Eternities. And that's right, Magic is going into space. Now besides me being a sci-fi nerd, we've got some pretty damn cool cards, even with the standard lands looking fantastic here. But if you are new to the world of Magic the Gathering, every couple of months we get a new set and theming. The start of the year gave us racing. We obviously had Final Fantasy, which is the reason why I'm playing my first ever Final Fantasy game, and now we've got Edge of Eternities, and generally, well, I'll follow a theming of Magic into gaming, because, well, the Warhammer Magic cards had me go back and play Space Marine. The Lord of the Rings theming gave me the idea to go back and take a look at Shadow of Mordor, which is by far the biggest video I have on my channel, and Final Fantasy obviously, well, had me take a look at this, but Edge of Eternities sort of has Mass Effect 2 breathing down my neck. But the sets and theming is all around space, spaceships, aliens, robots, monsters, and, well, more. And going through some of the cards and creating some decks for myself in my free time, but the card Space-Time Anomaly is a brilliant card that goes alongside decks that give you life, as well as slapping down some hard spells. Or the Spacecraft Artifact Extinguisher Battleship, that when it enters, you destroy a target non-creature permanent. Then this spacecraft deals 4 damage to each creature. Or for my giant snake coma deck, I found the Leviathan creature Starwinder, that whenever it deals damage to a player, you draw that many cards. And it wouldn't be a Magic set without also some great variants as well. Edge of Eternities has boosters, bundles, collector boosters, and yes, of course, commander decks like the counter-intelligence decks, which is all about boosting artifacts and proliferating counters. And with the new change that you can now have spaceships and legendary vehicles as your commander, with the new commander ship In-Spirit flagship vessel giving your artifacts hexproof and indestructible is bonkers. Keith, if you're watching this, you are not allowed this card. But if you're interested in Magic the Gathering, sci-fi, Star Wars, Mass Effect, Star Trek, hell, even Galaxy Quest, well, anything sci-fi based. If you are interested in sci-fi and want a fun, awesome tabletop card game that you can kind of play with anyone, I highly recommend Magic the Gathering and taking a look at the Edge of Eternity set, which releases on the 1st of August. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, I got about 7.5 hours of the way through Final Fantasy Remake Intergrade, and personally, I had a few issues with it because it became a bit of a slog to get through, and I'll come back to that later in this video. However, Final Fantasy VII is a damn visual, stunning game on top of having great voice acting, music, and small little attention to detail moments that had me impressed. And yes, I'll admit there were also some moments where I was actually having a bit of fun. Now, as I mentioned, I got 7.5 hours through the story, but the opening premise is that you play as one of gaming's most iconic characters in Cloud Strife, who is a hired mercenary to break into the evil Shinra Corporation's Mako?
You do realize what Mako is, don't you?
Mako reactor, and you have to blow it up. Now, Cloud is hired by the freedom fighter group known as Avalanche. Now, Shinra is your traditional evil corporation, and we're told that they are sucking and draining the lifeblood of the planet in Mako, a green mist-like energy, and it's being used in multiple reactors around the main city of Midgar. Now, right at the start of the game too, we are introduced to other mainline characters in Final Fantasy VII, with Biggs, who looks and sounds like Charlie Sheen, especially from Hot Shots. Jessie, who is this over-enthusiastic and flirty explosive expert, who I felt like she is constantly just giving you gifts. Wedge, who is this large, lovable member of Avalanche and is, he's voiced by fucking Badger from Breaking Bad. And Barrett, who, even though I know very little about this, he's like sometimes a funny, caring father who also has a Gatling gun for an arm. But honestly, I felt like cutting off his other arm for how he would talk down to Cloud in the start of the game.
Stamp scared to bite the hand that fed him? Or is he a loyal little doggy?
Hey! You're talking to my guy all wrong. It's the wrong tone. Do it again, I'll stab you in the face with a soldering iron.
Finally though, we got a character who is probably safe to say more memorable and recognisable than Cloud or Sephiroth in Tifa, who is one of Cloud's love interests, and with a set of eyes like that, how could you not fall in love with her when you first meet her?
She's beautiful, she's rich, she's got huge tracts of land.
But well, as the story starts, Cloud is a mercenary who's only accepted one job to get paid with Avalanche, and the main objective is blowing up the Mako reactor. Now from here, the simple job evolves and elaborates into doing more jobs for Avalanche, introducing you to more characters, giving you teasers of Cloud's history and backstory, and his relationship with one of gaming's most iconic villains in Sephiroth. Combat here, well, it's not turn-based like the original, but it acts more like a button basher with either the option to swap out to a different party member and control them, or to actually give them orders and commands, and each playable hero or character here is more useful than others. For example, Cloud's got his iconic Buster Sword, which is great at close combat, sure, but if you've got, say, an enemy turret that is planted up on a wall, or areas that Cloud can't reach, Cloud is as useful as a condom at a baptism, but that's where Barrett comes in handy because he's got a Gatling gun for a fucking arm. The combat though, well, that was kind of the first problem I had with Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, which I'll just say Final Fantasy Remake from here on out, but well, it is a button basher, but it is not a fun button basher like Devil May Cry, or like sort of The Bouncer from PlayStation 2. I don't know why that came to mind, but you know, Final Fantasy, The Bouncer, kind of links together. Anyways, but it's not a fun button basher like Devil May Cry, but it's also not a refined button basher like, say, the recent God of War games. The combat here is just really blocky and kinda average, where you'd be mid-swing using Cloud and his giant sword for an enemy to attack and stagger you while you're in the middle of an animation, where you will do a heap of combos and it will look somewhat impressive, especially if you've got new abilities or moves and find yourself dealing very little damage. You know what? The combat here, I would say, is a little similar to that of the Avengers video game, in that it is fine, but it's not great.
What the fuck did I just hear?
Now, your characters here do level up, they do learn new abilities such as being able to cast lightning and fire or analyze enemies to determine their weaknesses, and the menus here do take a second or two to get the hang of, but once you wrap your head around it, it is pretty straightforward. And each playable character in combat can use those spells like cast lightning or use items like potions to keep themselves alive, but each hero here also has special attacks unique to their characters and limit breaks, which is sort of like your character's main iconic special attack, where Cloud will do some hard hitting slashes towards an enemy, and I won't lie, they are pretty cool when you use them. It does get a little bit annoying though when the game says, yeah, you can use your limit break against this enemy that's flying, but your attacks just don't connect. You kind of just wasted the attack. But the one thing I know or remember, it's called sort of like a core memory drilled into my brain about Final Fantasy games, is the option or ability to summon allied sort of units or allies or whatever. The iconic fire elemental, which I had to Google because I thought he was a demon, in Ifrit, which I see this dude pretty frequently when my brother would play Final Fantasy as a kid, but here you can summon Ifrit or support characters for a limited time. They will deal damage or they can heal you, and when the time limit ends for them, they will retreat, but they will do a wicked powerful attack and then disappear like a fart in a hurricane. But while the summons were cool, the voice acting, the graphics, the sound design, hell, Barrett actually does the victory music when winning in combat, which is kind of a nice touch.
Oh, this calls for a song! Da, 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 da.
I just couldn't find the strength to keep going with Final Fantasy, and for me it was for a few reasons. Now, I took a heap of notes during my time playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, and obviously these are my personal opinions. If you like Final Fantasy, that is all good, my dude. I just think this game really isn't for me. But firstly, the combat, while it is not turn-based, it is pretty damn boring. I did find myself getting bored with when monsters or creatures or general Shinra goons would just come running. Even boss fights, like you're supposed to feel like excitement or fear when you're fighting something big, I just got bored. The weapons in this game also didn't feel like they carried any weight with them as well. Now, I played this on PC using a PlayStation controller as well, and the inputs felt really clunky and unrefined. Now, I did mention that this game kind of feels like the combat from that Avengers game, and it kind of does, but Avengers also had weight to some of its combat. Like, the sound design as well also went along with the combat and complemented it. Like, Thor's hammer had a great feel to it, where it works sort of like Kratos in the recent God of War games. Captain America's shield had that brilliant sound of bouncing around enemies and coming back to you, but here in Final Fantasy, using Cloud's giant iconic Buster Sword felt more like I was swinging a damn paddle pop stick around rather than a giant sword. And still, with combat here, there is a moment where at the first, maybe it's 4 or 5 hours into the game, I honestly can't remember, but there's a moment where you're on a motorbike and there are Shinra guards chasing you down and they're riding alongside you. And as Cloud, you've got to get next to them and slash them with your sword. Now normally I'd be sitting there going, fair enough, Cloud has no ranged attacks. Only for Charlie Sheen and Badger from Breaking Bad to be on another motorbike, and those characters have and use guns, but they just sit and complain and you as Cloud need to protect them. But the cherry on top for this was you've got Jessie on the back of Cloud's bike, and she just sits there hugging onto you doing nothing, and her pistol is literally sitting on her butt crack. Like, why doesn't she actually do something?
Come on!
The story and sort of introduction to is also kind of boring. Now, we start off as a mercenary to blow up a reactor, but we're not told why we're doing it. We're not given any real introduction into any characters here in the story. Then, as we escape the city after blowing up the reactor, we see flashes and visions of Sephiroth, which is cool, and it actually added some interest to me. But it didn't really explain anything. But I can generally let that pass because Cloud and Sephiroth having a history was interesting and was kind of a bit of a motivation to keep going through, keep seeing what I can find. But what got me with the story was after we blow up the reactor at the start of the game, we go back to the slums area of Midgar where Tifa and members of Avalanche live and they plan their next attack. Now during the start of the game, Cloud is told that he is a mercenary, he's only doing this job to get paid. And Barrett keeps harking on to you saying you'll get paid when you get back to the base. And Avalanche keep pulling Cloud on about paying him to the point where I sat there going, if I were Cloud, I'd either start removing limbs from Barrett so he looks like the pirate in Family Guy.
Goodness gracious, great balls of fire!
Because this dude is a fucking dick. What the game does instead though, because you get back to the, the slum area of Midgar, and instead of getting paid and explaining the story, you're running around town changing water filters for Tifa while the team figures out a way to pay you. And I'm sitting there going, no, if you've not paid me, I'm not going to run around and change water filters. Like, fuck off, pay me.
I want to know where my money is, and I want to know right now!
But spoiler alert, maybe not. I know it's only 7 hours in the game or 8 hours, and who gives a fuck? But anyways, we find out that Cloud is sick, and by the time this revelation is made as well, I honestly had gotten to the point where I had given up, and I'd stopped maybe 20 to 30 minutes after this revelation. I also found too that I wasn't overly caring, connecting, interested. They're all kind of the same thing anyways, but I didn't care about any character in this game. Jesse was constantly asking for Cloud to help out and kind of annoyingly flirting with him as well. Tifa kinda leads you on about keep doing more work for Avalanche with a crew that doesn't really want to pay you because you're a fucking mercenary, you deserve to be paid, you're not part of this crew. And when you ask about being paid, they're like, hey, why don't you do some extra work while we find a way to pay you? Badger and Charlie Sheen were but honestly man, Barrett was the most annoying for me. Probably the only character who had some kind of interest for me that kind of wanted to keep going besides Cloud and Sephiroth's kind of connection was Aerith, who when we're first introduced to her, she has this really cool introduction where we see these weird ghost things going on, and when Cloud makes physical contact with her, he can see them. But by the time she reappears in the story, my brain had already clocked out, and it was just bland, boring combat in my head. Having said all that though, there were some things that I thought were cool here and there. Firstly, yes, Barrett sings the battle victory music after combat. It is this cool little note and brought a smile to my face. The exploration in the world, while it is a bit linear, like there's pathways you can follow, there's not much, or at least during my time playing it, there's not much of an openness to it. It did remind me a little bit of Splinter Cell Conviction in a way, but it does have some really cool attention to detail, and even the NPCs look cool and unique here. There is a mini game for darts inside Tifa's bar, which is actually really fun, and I actually kind of really enjoyed that, more so than actually playing the game. But there's also a combat mechanic where enemies can bind and hold you down, stunning you, forcing you to swap out and play as other heroes in your party too, so you can't really tunnel vision and going, nah, I'm not playing as Barrett, I'm not playing as Tifa, I just want to play as Cloud. Looks like Cloud's actually stuck by some enemies, I need to swap out. I didn't mind that aspect of getting you to play other characters. Obviously though, Final Fantasy VII wasn't really for me. I think you may need to have to grow up playing the first or original Final Fantasy VII game in order to actually enjoy this, to appreciate the difference between the original release and the remake. A little bit like, say, Resident Evil 2, like if you played that as a kid and then played the remake now, you would really fucking appreciate what they've done here. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad game, I'm saying Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate personally did not work for me.
You mad?
I know there are people out there that absolutely love Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate and Final Fantasy VII Remake, or whatever you want to call it, and I'm super excited for you guys to get more in this series. I just think for me, Final Fantasy VII, it just didn't click. It could also be a thing of maybe I should check out a different, newer Final Fantasy game that might have, say, different combat style, different story introductions or premises, rather than looking at a well-loved entry where the fans already know what's going on with characters and stories, something new and different in the sort of the lineup of Final Fantasy games. But after over 7.5 hours of gameplay, sitting down with no distractions and just diving into this game, it just wasn't for me. The question is though, do I then try and do another Final Fantasy game, or do I just move on to The Last of Us? But whether you love Final Fantasy VII or you too think Barrett needs to watch what he says after you haven't been paid yet after blowing up a reactor, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.